I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed, thinking something out of my nightmares, standing right there.
I am at it again. Just finished up with the Jetta. We have the Jetta prepped up, fresh oil inside the car. Did an oil change, filter change. That is running nice and smooth, good to go. Took it for a test drive, and now starting to prep up for the S5. My plans for this today is to at least get it situated for snatching off the front end again. It is a shame how many times I've ripped off this front end in the past 6 months. I can't believe it, but it is what it is. A couple weeks ago, it had a slight boil over when I pulled into the driveway, and it didn't overheat. It was just starting to bubble up quite a bit. I saw the expansion tank, everything bubbling up, and I was like, okay, I didn't see any type of coolant flow, and the thermostat must have pretty much gave up the ghost once I was getting closer towards home. I didn't have any temperature lights coming on, so it was good that I made it back without any type of breakdown. My plans was to at least swap out the thermostat or the water pump instead of just troubleshooting and ripping everything off, to try to discover if it had a plastic impeller and if I had impeller failure or anything like that. I chose just to go ahead, order an updated water pump with a metal impeller as well as a newer thermostat with housing, and decided to change the alternator, the radiator as well. I don't even want to jinx that about alternator, but change the radiator as well because it had a hairline crack in the upper hose last year sometime. I sealed it up with epoxy and it wasn't leaking, but just due to the fact that the radiator was getting pretty brittle when I went to remove that upper hose one time before, it actually formed a hairline crack, and I'll post a picture of that once we get a little bit closer. But either way, let's get this thing jacked up and start prepping to rip off the front end. We are now jacked up, got the top tray removed off of the grill cover. I'm going to start removing some of the accessories. I already got my inlet duct removed. I'm going to prep to start snatching out these headlights on the driver and the passenger side and keep moving as far as I can get. I had a late start, so I'm just going to see how far I can get tonight. I have a great portion of the front end removed, and now I have access to my radiator. I'm going to remove the transmission cooler and a few other parts, remove the condenser, and then that way I can have better access. But as I mentioned before, right here is where I had a hairline cracked on the radiator, and that came from trying to remove this upper hose, wiggling it back and forth, and it caused a hairline crack right around here. I put some JB Well epoxy on there and it sealed it up very good, so it lasted for the most part and hadn't leaked any other part of my commute back and forth. But as you can see, the discoloration on this plastic end tank, where it's brownish up here from all the heat discoloration and it's black down here, as a result of this thing being old and getting somewhat brittle up at the top end, I decided to go ahead and swap out the radiator. Let's go ahead and see what else we can get removed and if we can gain access to the water pump and the thermostat housing. Removing the oil cooler is quite simple. You have to pop up these clips right here. Once you pop these up, you can kind of pull this out and upward so that it can come from out of this lip right here on the side. So you would raise this up, tilt it back a little bit, and try to raise this whole thing up out of this clip, this retaining clip. And then as far as the condenser itself, these top clips right here, they latch it in. When you slide it in, it slides down into place and these spring forward. It's a matter of pushing these back and prying this up. I usually use like a seal remover, something thin to get in here, and then you can kind of raise it up like that out of the slot on all four sides. And then once you get it up, you can slide the whole thing out. I'm draining the fluid. Not sure if I can get a good look up in there because of the glare. But up in here, it's a plug that I use a long flat tip screwdriver, or Phillips, you can use that as well, to gain access to right back there. It's a little hard to see. Let's see if we can get a look from the bottom. Yeah, it's a tight area. But either way, I use that screwdriver to loosen this up, and that'll drain the fluid right out. Our radiator fan is held in pretty much similar to the condenser, but it's got a lower clip that snaps and holds it in place. Right here, you have to pull this clip back. Once you pull this back, this should slide out of the slots right up in here. You have your upper slot and your lower slot, but the clip is locking in on the lower slot of the radiator. We have the radiator out and removed. These plugs were a little difficult to separate from off the radiator fan, so I just end up swinging the fan out of the way and just letting it hang down. We finally have access to our front thermostat housing, and I stuck some earplugs to plug up these ports real quick just to prevent any transmission oil from leaking out on the ground. I managed to catch most of the leakage right there. Unfortunately, a lot of these engines were and are notorious for having leaky valve cover gaskets, and it drips down all over and just coats the engine with oil, and it's a mess. When I go to put a built motor back in this thing, I'll try to seal everything up a lot better and hopefully eliminate and root cause that, because I definitely hate any type of sloppy, oily engine. I am back outside, about to pick back up where I left off from working on the Audi S5. It rained the past few days, so I'm not sure how far I'm going to get today, because we're supposed to receive more rain in the next few hours, but hopefully I can make a little more progress. We're going to pick back up, so a quick recap. This is what I have. I'm swapping out the original radiator. Before, I had the epoxy right here. It had a hairline crack going around here. Removing this top hose was a little difficult, and I'm wiggling and trying to get it separated, and it formed a hairline crack around here, and I had to put epoxy on it. That did stop the leaking, but you can kind of see over here where it was some discoloration on the end tank, and that made it more brittle. That's the source of a lot of the heat going through this, and this got pretty brittle. I'm in here already about to replace other parts on the car. I was like, might as well swap this out while I'm in here instead of having to backtrack again and continually removing the front end off this vehicle, far more than I would like to. Main objective is to replace the water pump and thermostat. I had a boil over situation where it was starting to boil over in my expansion tank, and I know it could be either or, possibly the thermostat or the water pump. This is an aftermarket water pump with a metal impeller. I like to upgrade to those. It came with the seal kit. It goes on the back of this, and for sealing this up when I installed the new water pump, you really have to be careful installing these, because it has pretty much almost like a hex shaft that is being driven, so you really have to use care. I've actually watched a few videos before where people have reinstalled these and actually broke the water pump or snapped this adapter, this housing right here. So we have to definitely use some care on that. Don't want to make the same mistake a lot of other people were making. And this appears to be an electronic assist, pretty much like a thermal assist thermostat. I would assume this is used to help heat up the thermostat a little quicker. You can see the connector plug right here, and giving it a little extra voltage would help this to open up a lot quicker for extra coolant flow in different driving conditions or for warm up. But let's see how far we can get today. I'm going to blow off the debris on the car. We'll jack it back up and keep my fingers crossed, and hopefully the rain will hold off a little more longer than that is expected. Let's get started. One of the first steps I want to take is try to clean up this a little bit. This is a lot of oil built up from the infamous, notorious leaky valve cover gaskets, and they've been replaced, but this is a lot of oil built up. I want to clean this up and remove this crossover tube. Unfortunately, it's been known that a few of these bolts can snap off in the blocks, so hopefully we do not encounter that this time. Maybe the oil helped protect the bolt a little bit, so that way it doesn't snap the head off of these, and then we end up having to drill into the block and tap it out. Hopefully this will all remove pretty good. So let's try to clean this up a little bit, remove the crossover tube, remove the cover for the water pump. Once we get this out, then we can start removing these hoses and swap out this thermostat housing right here along with the thermostat. It's cleaned up a little bit better. Now we're going to go ahead and start removing this hardware and remove this crossover tube. Now we can actually see the bolts that we're trying to access. Well, I'm off to a good start. These bolts did remove out of my crossover tube, which is very good. I usually will tap my hammer into get a bolt and tap the socket into the head of the bolt, just so you don't make a mistake and mushroom the heads or anything off. And as you can see, some of the bolts builds up surface rust, so you can easily snap the heads of these off. The bolts didn't look too bad, at least for the crossover tube. This was probably the best looking bolt right here, and that was over here placed on this side. But yeah, you can easily see how with just the surface rust building up, you can snap these off. I will definitely replace the hardware. I loosened all of these up, so these loosen up very well, which is good. I have to remove the crossover tube before I can remove this last bolt, and at least we'll have this out of the way, and then we can start removing the front cover for the water pump. Well, our first little obstacle, all the bolts loosened up very well. These are loosened. And the stubborn one that had a lot of surface rust right here, this is the one that reamed out a little bit on the inside of the threads right here. This is a T30 that's for all of these. It fits these as well as the crossover tube. That crossover tube removed without any problem. What I usually do, I'll use care, get a pry bar and pry just the back part of the crossover tube and pull it out. Make sure you don't do any damage and just wiggle a little bit, that'll pop out. But right here, I'm not majorly concerned if the head of this snaps off, because this is going into the water pump and we do have a replacement water pump. But in cases like this, I'll use a triple square, the neck size that's pretty much close to whatever tool I'm using, and see if I can tap the triple square inside this and manage to see if we can loosen this up. I used a hammer and tapped the M6 triple square into the head of the bolt, and let's see if we can get this removed without snapping off the head. And we're looking good, it worked. I tapped it in, made sure it was seated in fairly good for the most part. But it worked. As you can see, it's coming out, and the head of this had mushroomed out pretty good, the inside. Wow, that bolt is a little longer than I thought it would have been. Okay, let's go ahead and remove the rest. It was very tedious to get this water pump pulled forward away from off of the engine block. Very tedious. I used a pry bar to pry this corner of the water pump using careful care, because you do not want to damage or crack your block. That'll be a wrap right there. But I used a pry bar to pry back on here while pulling on the opposite side and wiggling back and forth to pretty much try to get it from out of that seal housing in the back where the shaft is driven. But before that, you want to definitely make sure you remove your lower connector from off your thermostat housing. That has to be removed, as well as this rear hose back there. So as a hose, that hose is about 4 inches long. I was able to use my hose clamp pliers and finagle back in here enough to loosen this up, spray it with a little lubricant and push it up, wiggle it to get it off, and try to pry this off of the feed for the water pump. This was very tedious, as I said, just trying to pry this off without damaging anything. You have 4 bolts that's pretty much securing this. The top 2 are longer. Those were the longer 2 bolts right here, and the shorter ones are the ones in the bottom. Once you remove these 4, this housing itself with the complete water pump assembly, thermostat and everything should pull forward, but very tight, as I stated. Now that I have it forward, I'm going to move this lower tube out of the way for the transmission cooler, and I can tilt this upward now so that I can gain access to this other hose right here. Remove this hose clamp, and then I can probably get it out the way. Had I taken this out of the way, this tube hose for the off of the AC compressor, then I would have had easier access to gain back here. Let's see if we can shine a little light back there to that hose clamp in the rear. But of course, I don't want to discharge my R134A, and then I have to recharge my air compressor for my AC. So we don't want to have to go through any of that if we don't have to. We're making some progress. Very tedious, as I stated. Now let's go ahead and move this stuff out of the way and at least pull this out of the engine compartment. Well, surprisingly, it looked like I may be able to remove this out without removing this hose clamp, and then I can change everything while it's outside of the engine compartment. I moved that lower feed for the transcooler out of the way and brought this hose right back up through the front part where it would connect to the radiator. And now it appears that this whole piece will just come on out of here, which is good. All I have to do is disconnect this hose, not disconnect the hose, just push it on through, and I can pull everything out. I'll use both hands to do that. I can actually pull it out right now. There's no big deal, but yeah, let's go ahead and just rip it out. There we go. We're out of there. That was messy, but you don't want to damage this shaft or bend or distort that in any way whatsoever, because that shaft in the back, that is your drive for your water pump impeller. So you definitely don't want to damage that at all. But this was up in there very good. As you can see, it's messy, but we're going to go ahead and clean up this mess and get this out of the way. I had the water pump removed, and I cleaned up around the area a little bit. I put some plugs in here because I didn't want to power wash and get any type of oil or anything up into this part right here that drives the water pump shaft. But something came up that is extremely concerning. Now that all of this is somewhat clean, at least a lot better, it appears I have a slow leak that's seeping from down here right around the crankshaft itself. I'm wondering if this front main seal is taking a dump, and it appears that it may have. I wiped it up a few times, still clean this off. The engine is not even running, and you have a seepage like this, so you can only imagine with the engine running and oil pressure built up, it would definitely push out quite a bit of oil right there. And that may be possibly a front main seal. What I may have to end up doing is take off the belt, remove this front harmonic damper, and inspect this a lot more thoroughly just to see if that is a possible cause. And that would definitely make sense with a lot of that oil built up that was around this area. We're cleaned up quite a bit better from all the oil that was built up from previous leakage from valve cover gaskets, but this may definitely explain what's going on with this lower section right here. I did make a little progress today, just as the weather forecast projected rain, and it just started raining. I had an extra half an hour before the rain hit. It was projected to start at 3 o'clock, picked up around 3:30. I removed the harmonic damper so that way we can see where that little seepage was coming from. There's a possibility it could have been a lot of the oil and caked up debris could have got trapped behind the harmonic damper when I was pressure washing the engine, and may have been just residually dripping oil. We'll see if that's the case. I will let this sit for a little while to see if there's any type of seepage from here, but the seepage was basically coming from this area and draining down, if you saw from the previous picture before. But we'll see. Hopefully there's no leak at all. I would rather remove this as a precautionary measure just to see, so that way I can reduce the amount of times and keep snatching the front end off. If I needed a front crankshaft seal, that's no problem. I do have a spare in the house, in my garage, which is no problem at all, because I have a spare 4.2 liter engine with forged pistons and everything that I was planning to build up. Therefore, we'll see. Hopefully it's just a false alarm, and we'll continue moving forward. We'll pick back up when this rain stops.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, maybe you'll get sick of being the monster out of my head, under my bed.
Turn the video off now, man.
Out of my nose.
Like, comment, subscribe.